Hello, dear Scorpios. This is your reading for the week of September 8th, or when it resonates, and it will not be for every Scorpio. And while I say Scorpio, please understand, of course, it could be Scorpio, Sun, Moon, Rising, somebody with a lot of Scorpio in their chart. The Scorpio collective energy, what I'm getting for you is the first thing that I saw was, as I was actually folding my laundry, was you going, hello, and then the echo coming back, hello, 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 is anybody there? There. And it's like you're standing there going, nobody's answering. All I'm getting is the echo of my own voice. And what Spirit was saying is, if you expect to hear them in the same way that you would hear yourself speak, then you will be disappointed, because for most people it's not going to come that way. That they really want to be able to reach you and speak with you directly. This is really something that they're really clear on in the collective. And Spirit in general right now is letting me know that they want to be more present in people's lives, daily lives, and that it is something to be understood as commonplace and not special, because they don't want people to feel as though it has to be something that you are born with or that is some kind of special gift. It is an innate part of the human physiology and psyche, and that once it becomes understood that it's more accessible and approachable, the more people are going to open to the possibility of it, and that's when they'll start hearing. The next thing they showed me, however, was this. It was a scene from the Harry Potter movie, book, The Goblet of Fire. So if you haven't seen this, you can actually look it up on YouTube, I believe. It is the scene where Harry is told to take this egg, which has a clue about the next challenge he has to do. In order to hear what the clue is, he has to actually have it underwater and be underwater with it. And then all of a sudden, he's hearing what it's meant to be, because the water is translating it into a frequency that his ears can hear, whereas when it is above the water in the air, it just comes out like a shriek. So that was really, really important to them. The image that they showed me just prior to giving me that was you standing looking at the water. And Scorpio, you know water is very important for you. But what they're saying is there is a difference between the effect of looking at the water and knowing it's important to you, and actually being in the water. And if you look at the water as a depth of consciousness, an unconscious place, but not just an unconscious place, a depth where one can move. Okay, please be clear. They're defining the water now as, think of the water like this. Just as you would look at the water and appreciate the beauty of it and feel the calming quality of it in your body, the experience of being in the water completely changes the way you interpret what's happening in the water. You feel the waves, you feel the sand on your feet if you're walking, you feel things rushing by you if there's fish or if there's seaweed, you feel the currents, you feel the different temperatures. And what they're saying is it's time for you to get into the water. So you can know and trust that there is spirit communication. They're taking it now into this. You can trust and know that there is spirit communication, and you can contact people and you can listen to readings. And that's the equivalent of standing on the shore and looking at the water. And then some of you will put your feet in the water and do a spread for yourself once in a while, or do a little bit of automatic writing, but not really develop it into a relationship with your higher conscious mind and your spirit guides. What they're saying is they're ready for you to dive in. They're ready they're ready to be there with you, for you to dive in and be able to experience that. the reason they're really talking about this now is because as I'm pulling the cards, what I'm seeing is this. And they're saying this to me, that you are the kind of sign that has worked and worked and worked and worked in very logical progression with a very high degree of intellect. And that you also have the capacity that has sometimes been overshadowed by the work. I'm going to speak in a sentence that makes sense now. You have the capacity to be as spiritually connected to other dimensions as you do to be intellectually astute. And that instead now, thank you, instead of trying to figure everything out the way you normally would with your beautifully logical intellect, you are now in the process of, some of you already doing it, some of you being moved to doing it more. You are in the process now of understanding what's underneath things. Instead of pulling up the carpet or instead of looking into the water trying to figure it out, you're getting into the water and you're letting the information come to you, which is the equivalent of you being able to communicate with spirit and channel information. Oh, that's good. Now, what they're saying, Scorpio, is that many of you have developed a strong intellect and a function of being able to work and create structures and achieve. And a lot of that has come for a lot of you as an outgrowth of creating security for yourself. And that there may not have been in your youth, your childhood and your youth, and possibly in your karmic lives, because for some reason, karmic lives feels like it comes up a lot with Scorpio for me when I read for you. There may not have been a lot of time for play. There may not have been a lot of space to be vulnerable, to really jump into the other way of thinking and being, because coming out of the structure would have been either dangerous or super uncomfortable or in some way threatening to your understanding of yourself or practically in your situation. What they're saying now is, now you achieve more by being able to sit in that dimension, that watery dimension of the subconscious and of the intuitive, of that beautiful moon energy, and just allow that to really fill you with understanding, sometimes way beyond words, definitely often way beyond logic. And that it is really, they're really just encouraging you now. Now, this is where I could get a little emotional because there is such strong support for you now to be able to understand that this movement towards that way of perceiving and that way of understanding and communicating opens up a whole other level of joy for you, a whole other level of ease and delight and excitement and an experience beyond what many of you would have imagined 5, 10, 20 years ago. And that there is such profound love in those dimensions that resonates with the core of who you are. I mean, really, the reality is it's the core of who we all are. But you're being reminded that that's who you are, that your essential nature is love. And it seems really important for Scorpio to know that right now. And that this process of expanding into these dimensions, what they're saying is they would really like you to approach it as a playful thing, as a loving act to yourself, to them, and to see them as loving, like if you could imagine the best teacher ever, either in your life or in the movies or in literature, the very best teacher ever. Imagine that they are that teacher. Imagine that you have access to that through your guides. And allow yourself the luxury of resting within that knowledge and exploring those relationships. Now, I know I hear this often from people about how do I get in touch with them? How do I know it's them? And to be honest with you, it's a very, very personal experience. There are certain techniques that you can use. One person who I have seen, who I believe to be genuinely authentic and has described experiences in her process that I have experienced and applies many of the same techniques, is Suzanne Giesemann. I believe it is Guiseman. And she runs courses. I don't. She runs courses. And so if it's something that you wish to explore, I feel fairly confident in saying I think she is an ethical person, and from what she has described, a really legitimate medium. So if you want to look at learning this in more of a structured way, she is somebody you might want to check out. I know there are other people out there, but she's the one that I think of in terms of familiar to me, my process, my standards. So that being said, what you're being told here is, this is where now you are giving up whatever childhood structures, beliefs, containment you had that got in the way of your humor, that got in your way of your ability to be a little out there, be exploring of those things. And I mean, realistically also, considering the time frame many of you are in now, if you are in my age group, much of this was not talked about, really. Even into my 20s and 30s, it was just starting to be talked about. So it's not that it was there in front of you and you went, no, but you didn't have the access to the information in the same way that somebody would today as a young person, as a youth. There are probably many of you who had a tendency towards metaphysical leanings and towards exploring different literature that might have brought this about for you. Or just had this sense of seeking, this sense of not quite belonging, which often happens to children and young people who have a very strong spiritual leaning but don't have any place within their life to anchor it and identify it as such. There is so often a yearning that we have, a desire that we have that we can't identify. And until we identify it as a spiritual desire, a desire to exist in that central energy, that balanced energy, that cohesive heart-mind energy and higher conscious awareness, until we can identify it as that, very often we just flounder around being lost and sometimes creating structures to try to fit in, and sometimes going into rebellion as a way not to get stuck in something that feels wrong, but not knowing where else to be. Spirit is saying, it's time for you to be able to lean into grace, whatever your situation is. And before I read this and remind you of what it says, please realize that if you are in situations now that you are only now identifying as contrary to your spiritual life, it's happening to a lot of people. It's not just happening to Scorpio. It's happening to a lot of people on the planet, because now it's literally as though all the chaos that is shaking up the world is waking up that urge again, that desire, because what's going on is so contradictory to that essential spiritual being that we are. And so it's waking up a lot of things. So in some cases, the structures are fine. You can still explore that within whatever structure you're in. And sometimes you realize that it's linked to an old containment pattern and that it doesn't suit you anymore. It might be that you need to leave that job and do something that is more suited to this. It might be that wonderful tarot reader whose name I can't remember right now, who gave up a big, huge corporate job, Spiritual Escapades, that's the one. Gave up a huge spiritual job corporate job in order to explore her spirituality sometime in her 30s, I think. And it's like, yep, that can happen. So what you're being told here, though, I'm going to cut to the chase, too late, is that you're being asked to remember that you can lean into grace if you are in a situation that's particularly difficult now. Grace is not earned. Grace is a state in which we receive, for no apparent reason, a divine influence which strengthens us in a way that eases whatever problematic or miserable state we find ourselves. Grace needs only to be accepted in order to be received. Okay? You also have the card that says love. Remember that you are essentially love, and that as you move into experiencing that, and it all starts by choosing to believe it and let yourself feel it. That is, and now look at that. Okay, that's perfect. That's the start, because that's a very high frequency. So is humor. Okay, excuse me a minute. I have to pick something up. Okay. You are being told in two cards here, you need to create a structure for yourself within which you keep checking in and you keep saying, but do I want to? With every choice that you make, do I want to? So a structured free flow for that. What's a structured free flow? A structured free flow is basically setting certain things that are definites. It might be 3 prayers a day, morning, noon, and night at your meals. It might be a definite of every time you're being asked to do something, your new rule now is to only say, I'll get back to you in 24 hours. And then you let yourself feel whether or not that's what's right for you. The structured free flow is very much about you getting in touch with what it is you want, what it is you don't want, and to notice where the structure that's already existing in your life is working or not working. You've got 2 structure cards here. One is about the structured free flow, and the other one is noticing where the structure isn't working for you. So, Scorpio, this is very much about staying in touch with yourself. Scorpio, as soon as I heard that, as soon as I said that, I heard slowing down. Slowing down, because the tendency is very often for you to jump in and do what can be done, and then realize that afterward you have sacrificed something in order to do that. And it might have been peace of mind. It might have been the time to sit quietly, to immerse yourself in the water of the other dimension. And so what you're being asked is pay attention to that. Look at what, can't and won't. Can't is the language of a child. Won't is the language of an adult. Yes, I can, but do I want to? This is very much about telling you, anchor yourself in love. Anchor yourself in the idea that you're going to be as playful about this as possible. Remember that you have grace to deal with. Check in with the choices that you make. Do you feel right about them? Slow down long enough to be able to feel what it is you want. And if you are looking for more information and more guidance to be in touch with the other dimensions, to be in touch with your guides, the first step always is to be willing and to state the desire, to state the intention, and state the intention to them. Of course, always with, you will only be accepting information and guidance, from those guides, teachers, healers that come in divine love for the highest good of all concerned. Always, always, and only. Never be so desperate to get contact that you'll let anybody in. And then give yourself time. Give yourself time every day to just spend with them without necessarily feeling like you need to get anything from them. Just say, I'm here. Let's just sit together and see if you'd like to work with my energy or not. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to slow down, and I'm just going to let you help work. I'm going to give this time to let you work with my energy so that we can be more in sync. You will not always hear from the loved ones who've passed over because they're not always able to contact you. They may not have the ability to work with your frequency as easily as they would a medium at this point in time. But they might do things like come to you in a dream. They might do things like turn the lights on and off, make noises, things like that. That is sometimes how they will communicate with you. And not just loved ones, the guides too. Just to say, hello, we're here, we heard you. Look for recurring numbers, 111, 222, 444, 1212. Notice those. Notice and ask your guides to give you things that are verifiable or that are so obviously out of the ordinary. Okay? I don't know why, but it seems really important to say that. Stop and allow. Stop and allow. Allow when you find yourself doubting. Stop yourself and say, why am I doubting? You know what? What's the benefit of doubting? Maybe it's time to give it up. Am I able to give it up now? Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to say that doubting this is not part of the formula. I'm just going to move forward as though it's real and as though it's happening. Okay? Scorpio, this is coming through with a lot of love and a lot of encouragement. I feel like it's been fairly long, so I'm going to stop now. But I feel that there are some really concrete steps in here. If I were to go back and listen to it, I think I would hear some really concrete steps. So good luck to you, my very dear, lovely, lovely Scorpios. Have some fun with this. This is time for you to have all this wisdom, this love, this insight, this freedom, and with fun. Okay? Take care.